Welcome to December 7th, the power of the mind, of our minds. So let me start by reading the passage that is in the newsletter. Jesus says, and he's talking to the Sadducees, "You are in error because you do not know the scriptures or the power of God. At the resurrection, people will neither marry nor be given in marriage. They will be like the angels in heaven. But about the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what God has said to you? I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living." When the crowds heard this, they were astonished at his teaching. We're seeing here that Jesus is using his ability to understand the Sadducees' motive and their question to provide a deeper insight. There's a power in the mind of this person. And in stating this deeper insight, I'll go back to the full story in a second, we have the response of the people that are all standing around. And what is it? It's astonishment, astonished at his teaching. The crowds were astonished at his teaching. Now, we could certainly interpret that, and probably if we look back at the original language, we can get a better sense of the nuance of the word. But for me, when I hear the word astonish, I think in a very simple way, it's the word wow. Wow. It could be like, wow, that's brilliant, or wow, look at him, he stood up to all these authorities. But nonetheless, it is a certain amount of wonder and being touched by what's being said because of the way he used his mind, the power of the mind. Now, what is right before here that Jesus is answering to, and I didn't want to put the whole passage in there, is that he gets approached by these authorities who have a difficult question for him. And that is that a man and a woman are married, and the man dies, and the brother marries the woman, because that was their policy back then, is you didn't leave the woman without a partner. But then the second one dies, and the third one marries her, and the third one dies, and the fourth one marries her, and on and on it goes. And the question, which is understandable in the limited thinking that their rules and laws had in that tradition, is, well, at the resurrection or after death, whose wife is she? Because the understanding was that you married and you were being bound beyond this journey where we have in this lifetime. So in a way, we've got a story that makes a lot of sense, right? It's a conundrum. It's a spiritual conundrum. And I would invite you to see if you can. It might be a little bit of a mental challenge, but see if you can come up with, in your belief system, in your spirituality, where do you have a conundrum like that you have certain practices or beliefs that inform your spirituality, and yet somehow they don't provide the answer to every circumstance. See if you can unearth outside of this meditation. Again, that could be some real mental challenge to see if you could hone in, because where we hold something as universally or eternally true that isn't an unchanging truth, we will constantly butt up with the need to change our minds, to be changed by truth. So it's not all about the mind, but to change, to have a mind that's, like in some practices of Buddhism, called the beginner's mind, that's flexible and open, like a child that's innocent is open to its surroundings, and is engaging with its surroundings with that sense of willingness to be impressed by what is observed. See if you can hone in on something that you hold as unchangeable, where there's really inflexibility. We all have them, even if in minute threads, they exist within us. And what this brings me to extrapolate from this is the imperative to understand the power of our minds. Now, in a way we do, right? Because we have certainly villainized the mind. We have certainly created lots of ways of talking about the mind that diminish it and put it down. So in a way, we are in touch with the power of the mind. Oh, I couldn't stop my racing thoughts. Oh, there I go again, thinking that thought. If only I could change my mind. My mind just led me astray. There are so many examples of where we point our finger at our minds because we recognize that the mind is influencing us in a way that's not leading to happiness or freedom. So in a way, we understand the power of the mind, but I'd like to invite you to get a little more intimate with your mind. So intimacy means that we don't stand aloof from the mind. We don't villainize the mind. We're not victims of the mind. I know I have at times felt myself to be a victim of my mind. If I was in a loop or something like that, like, can't seem to break free. But that then creates even a greater separation between us and our full selves. And part of the healing process, part of awakening anew, is to come into an intimacy with our minds that allows the stillness to reveal what's happening there. Not analyzing, not picking apart, not judging, not forcing, but rather revealing. Because in that, if we shift our relationship, if we let our minds shift our relationship with our minds, we open up a field of possibility. And if Barbara Brennan's description of creation as infinite intelligence, if that's accurate, we open ourselves up to the infinite field of intelligence to be informed in ways that we couldn't have been informed before, because our patterns kept us away from it. The power of the mind. Think about when you're a child. I know that I was a very, very curious and audacious thinker. I was always letting my imagination play in the playground of being alive, imagining games, imagining realities, imagining what could happen if I could all of a sudden fly, imagining who's hanging out on that cloud up there that's near the sun. I want to go join them because I know they're up there. So, I know that my mind was very, very, very active, and always also was very impelled to understand. And fortunately, my spirituality would break me open to understand things oftentimes more deeply in critical moments. But then there was the tension too. And this is a secondary optional reflection question for you. Do you have this tension? There was this tension that I noticed when I was about 6 years old. I noticed that my thoughts could travel so fast, but my body couldn't travel with my thoughts. And it created tension for a while. Like, what is up with that? How can that be? Because it seemed to create a gap. Because here was my thought in moving forward in a new aspect of reality, but my body was still sitting on the grass in Cincinnati, Ohio. And it proved to be a tension that let me open up to an understanding that is beyond the normal forms of logic. So when our mind is great with habit, right? Great with cognitive functions. We're all on the spectrum of certain aptitudes with the skills that our mind can do with systematics and logic and creation. And we're all on the precipice of our own becoming, however, in opening our minds anew. In hearing a word, just like those crowds heard the word of Jesus, and they heard it, the deeper message, in a new way. Because astonishment is kind of like a, wow, there's something happening there. What could it be like if we let the tension of the gap between our thoughts and our everyday reality, if we let that tension break us open anew? And I do think that stillness, which is the main theme of this Advent preparation, is one of the key ingredients. John of the Cross says in one of his poems, I saw the Virgin pregnant with the Word walking down the street. But it could only be heard in silence. This word that she was pregnant with could only be heard in silence. The experience of the pregnancy of creation can only be heard in silence. We are on the cusp of a Catholic feast day of the Immaculate Conception, where you have the feminine, an experience of the feminine coming into the world in all its pureness, is what it points to. It's marking a noted and reputed historical event in Catholicism of Mary being conceived. But if we broaden it out even to archetypal or symbolic symbolism, it's the pregnancy of the feminine in all its purity. But that pregnancy of creation of our lives is discovered, I believe, in stillness and in silence. Teresa of Avila, a beloved friend of mine and another mystic, Spanish mystic, she talks a lot about the role of the mind. Now, when she was very young, when she was in her early 20s, she got very, 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 very sick. And she, at that time, gave up a practice that she had engaged for a while called mental prayer. And we'll just call it prayer. It's prayer that is a conversation. So mental prayer would be the use of the mind with the intentions, with the heart, but there's a discourse that happens. And so it does involve the mind. And she was in a culture that bore influence upon her, that engaging in prayer and mental prayer was somehow arrogant, that it was actually more humble to abandon prayer. So whereas we may see this opening to prayerful contemplative states as an actual greater act of truth and humility and opening of the self, back in her era, it was seen as the opposite. And we can get into the theology of that. There was a reigning theology of the transcendence of God, and therefore anything approaching God was already meant to be absolutely pure. So there was some prevailing belief systems that, while they still exist in culture, they're not so strong in our culture as they used to be. So there were reasons for it, but then she was turned on to a book, The Third Alphabet, that pointed out so eloquently how imperative the use of mental prayer is, how it's part of our birthright to have these discourses. And from there, she never abandoned prayer again. In fact, she points out in her treatise on the meditation of the Song of Songs, she said it's incredibly important to use the mind to go into the words of this sacred text. So the Song of Songs is a Hebrew love song of the creator and the created. And she said, in it, even stopping, even directing your focus upon one word can reveal mysteries to you that could take up your lifetime. That is the power of our minds. That's the power of our minds. And so while we are largely unconscious, and so there is a call for mercy and compassion upon the limited way our minds go about things, the way we use our minds. It's worthy of compassion. While that is there, we also are called into an intimacy of the mind so that we develop a mind that's capable of changing, capable of being truly bendable and flexible and influenced, able not only in its final conclusions, which would be like a blind obedience, but able to be so influenced that we pick up on the fragrance and the threads of the insights that lead to final conclusions. We become familiar with ourselves. There's a lovely, you've probably heard this story, but there is a lovely story of a Native American story, and a young Native American man is seeking counsel from an older Native American man. And he says, I have a war going on inside of me. There's like two wolves attacking each other. And one of them is about goodness and good thought. And the other one is all about, anger and all sorts of other destructive things. And he said, anger is not destructive, by the way, but impelled through aggression and arrogance and that. And they're going at each other. And he said to the older counselor, he said, I'm really scared. Who's going to win? And the elder says, whichever one you feed more is going to win. So we do have a conscious part in realizing the power of our minds. We may not be capable of rising into the mastery of understanding all the hidden movements and unconscious that are pushing the mind in its thoughts. But we do have the capacity to make choices to feed the good wolf and to make choices to do practices like we're doing right here to develop the beginner's mind so that we are flexible to the brilliance of the insight that's right there, the pregnancy that's right there before us. So with that, our meditation today, you can probably guess we're going to do something with the mind. So I'm going to go ahead, and since I mentioned the word mental prayer and the power of mental prayer as a discourse, as the use of this faculty, I'm going to open our meditative practice with a prayer that I hope you'll find is resonant for you and isn't opening up any way you might pray, opening up any conflict to a way you might pray. And then we're going to move into a mental exercise that is not so focused on the ineffable, that's very much in the body. And it's going to be a sitting form of something called yoga nidra, but it's an adaptation of that. And what I'm going to invite you to do is first connect to the breath. And then you're simply going to follow my guidance. You're going to listen and then use your mind to focus your attention on the parts of the body. And we'll start with one part of the body, and then we'll go all the way through the body. And you will notice what will happen when you use your mind this way. All right. Okay, I invite you to close your eyes. Spirit, in whom we live and move and have our being, ineffable source of which we are the wellspring, the created. we sit together in circle, opening ourselves for the transformation of our own minds. We ask that all of the miracles and insights that would facilitate this would happen effortlessly for us in this meditation and beyond. We know that the use of our minds contributes to the whole of creation and the cosmos. And we ask to be granted the gift of a pure mind. Refresh us, O Source at our center, O Self showing up in the form of each one of us. May we be transformed in our minds and our hearts and our bodies to experience the purity and brilliance of our own being. I invite you to bring your focus to your breath. Notice the breath. Notice how you are breathing and being breathed. And now, bring the focus of the mind to the crown of the head. And if you are able or comfortable, simultaneously keep the focus on the breath and let the breath in a mysterious way be there at the crown as you focus on the crown of your head. And draw the focus down into the brain and the forehead and the skull, keeping the breath there with the point of focus. Bring your inward gaze, your intention, your mind into the face. Let the breath rest there as well. The eyes, the nose, the forehead, the cheeks, the lips, the ears. Bring the focus into the throat and the neck. And bring the focus to the shoulders and chest. And bring the focus into the region of the heart and the lungs specifically. And bring the focus into the arms and the hands, letting the arms and hands relax with the focus in the breath that is now centered here. And bring the focus to the torso, the diaphragm, the internal organs, the abdomen, the low back, and the mid back. Move the focus into the hips and the butt, the pelvis. And move the gaze into the thighs and the knees. And then to the calves and the ankles and the feet. Now, keeping your mind on the feet, keep the left heel down, but lift the left toes ever so slightly off the ground. And return the foot to the ground. And lift the right toes and ball of the foot, and return the foot to the floor. Left foot up and down. Right foot up and down. And one last time. Left foot up and down. Right foot up and down. Together we bring our meditation for today to a close. When you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes. Blessings, my friends. Have a wonderful day.